In this video, you'll see how to receive and invoice monographs in WorldShare Acquisitions. There are a few workflow options for receiving and invoicing items you've ordered in Acquisitions. You can receive an invoice at the same time, you can receive an item first and then invoice later, or you can invoice first and receive the item later. The workflow option you choose will depend on a number of things, including your staff responsibilities, vendor requirements, for example, if you need to prepay for items you've ordered, or just your own preference or specific workflow procedures. In this video, I'll go through the steps to receive and invoice at the same time. It's important to know that when you receive single-part monographs that you've ordered in WorldShare Acquisitions, the local holdings record is automatically created at receiving. However, for multi-part monographs, you will need to add the local holdings record after receiving on the copy screen. So let's say I've received these two titles that I had ordered through WMS Acquisitions. I have a single-part monograph, While Justice Sleeps, and I have a multi-part monograph, the 9-volume Gale Encyclopedia of Medicine. So after logging into WMS, I've selected Acquisitions. Next, I'll click the Receive and Invoice tab on the left to get started. The processing type default is monograph, which is what I want to receive my single-part monograph. The action default is for receive and invoice at the same time, so I'll also leave that set as selected. I want to create a new invoice, so I'll click New Invoice. I'll enter an invoice number. This is a number you create, and this is in addition to the system invoice number that is automatically assigned. So I'll enter RB52821. Next, I'll start typing the first few characters of the vendor I used to order these titles, ROB, and then I'll select my vendor, Robinson's Books, when it appears in the drop-down list. For the invoice date, I'll leave it set at the default, which is today's date. If I wanted to change the date, I could click the calendar widget and select a date. I'll also leave the tax handling set to the default, tax item cost, and then I'll click Save. You can now see that the vendor and invoice number appear on the left under Receive an Invoice. Now I'm ready to click View Items to find my first title. If I wanted to see all of my outstanding items, I could just click in the search text box and hit Enter on my keyboard, or I can search for a specific item. I'll leave the search set to Title, and then I'll click in the search box. And I'll enter my first title, While Justice Sleeps. And in just a moment, the title appears below for me to receive. If I need to make any change to the classification number and cutter, I could edit these now. My library is profiled for Library of Congress classification, so the call number here is automatically populated from either the 050 or 090 in the bibliographic record. I'm going to accept the call number as it is. If I needed to change the bibliographic record that I'm using, I could hover over the blue information icon and I could click Change Resource, but I'm going to keep the original record that I used for this order. To receive this title, all I need to do is enter the barcode that I'll put on this book. And this action will receive the item and create the local holdings record. On the bottom of the screen, you can now see it says one item processed in this session. So I'll click this to expand it. If I needed to edit the local holdings record, for example, if I needed to change the shelving location, I could click the barcode to go to the item details screen. Otherwise, I'm ready now to receive my second title, the multi-part monograph Gale Encyclopedia of Medicine. So I need to change the processing type. So I'll click the processing type drop down, and I'm going to select serial, which is the correct processing type for multi-part monographs as well as print serials. Then I'll click in the search text box, and I'll enter the first couple words of the title, Gale Encyclopedia. The system starts filtering on the search words that I've entered, and it finds my title. To start receiving the multi-part monograph, I'll click Start. The receipt status changes to Partially Received. If I've received all of the volumes or parts of the multi-part item, I can then click Finish. You can see that the invoice that I created is still populated in the boxes on the left, and the invoice number is in the bottom right of my screen as well. So to add this title to this invoice that I just created, I'll click Add to Invoice. And on the Add Item to Invoice dialog, I could select Pay in Full, Pay a Percentage, or Pay by a certain amount. I'll leave it set to Pay in Full and click Add. Then I'll click the Items Processed in this Session area, and I can see an entry for each action that I took. I started the receiving, I finished the receiving, and I added the item to my invoice. After creating and adding items to an invoice, the invoice status is set to Open, and the invoice number, status, etc. are added to the Invoice tab on the order. After receiving single part monographs, the item has the receipt status of Received in Acquisitions. A local holdings record is automatically created. The item is available for discovery and circulation. If you've set a processing delay, the item will be available after check-in or after a certain number of days, and this is set in Service Configuration. After receiving multi-part monographs, the item has a receipt status of Received in Acquisitions. A local holdings record, however, is not automatically created, and this needs to be added later after the receiving on the copy screen. The item will be available for discovery and circulation after the holdings are created. If you've set a processing delay, the item will be available after check-in or after a certain number of days that you've set in Service Config. If I'm ready to review and pay the invoice, I can go directly to it by clicking the link to the invoice in the Invoiced column. Now I'm viewing the invoice. I can edit the invoice number, the date, and the tax handling, and the currency if I need to. I'm not going to edit these, but I will add an external invoice ID, which is a unique identifier for the invoice used by an external financial system. I'll also add a payment reference ID, which is a check or transaction number for the payment actually submitted for this invoice. These two ID numbers can also be added when I click Pay to pay the invoice. Next, I'm going to scroll down to view the items on the invoice. I could still edit the cost and discounts and the funds if I needed to. When I'm finished editing the invoice, I'll click Pay. And the system responds, you're about to pay the invoice. Only date paid, external invoice ID, and payment reference ID will be editable after payment. Then I'll click Pay again to confirm this action. And the status now changes to paid, with the date paid noted next to it. So after paying the invoice, in addition to the status now set to paid, the total amounts move from my encumbered amounts for the funds I've indicated to the expended amounts for those funds. If you have questions about receiving and invoicing, you can find contact information for OCLC support in your region by going to help.oclc.org and clicking on Contact OCLC Support.